Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a pretty bleak, mythic realm. Picture this, a dying kingdom of the gods, absolutely steeped in systemic decay, total isolation, and this freezing, dead silence. The old rules, they just don't apply anymore. The cosmic constellations we used to rely on have entirely evaporated. And right in the middle of these desolate, rotting ruins, a lone seeker is faced with a terrifying choice. They can either succumb to the creeping rot that's actively destroying the deities, or they can transcend it entirely. But to transcend it, they have to go through a grueling psychological descent and a radical spiritual rebirth. So today we're going to explore a grim dark fable rooted deep in Nietzschean philosophy. We're tracking the harrowing, solitary journey of the Übermensch.
Now, to really grasp the magnitude of this journey, you've got to understand what's being left behind. The old gods, figures like Wotan and Donar, they're described now as nothing more than clumsy kings in a cosmic theater. They are completely trapped in this cycle of systemic decay. The very roots of their world are rotting, poisoned by rank rain, and their grand halls are literally splintering under eons of neglect. Ultimately, these gods are doomed. They're going to sink into an absolute freezing silence under the crushing weight of their own corruption. They've just become victims of fate, weeping and wailing as their once shining kingdom collapses into ash and shadow. Okay, let's dive into this, because this dying divine order, as bleak as it is the exact crucible required to forge our philosophical survival guide.
To tell the story of the Übermensch's ascent from this ruin, our sources don't rely on standard prose, and you definitely won't find any comforting melodic rhymes here. Instead, they use a fascinating ancient verse style called Stabrime. Basically, it's an alliterative style that uses short, punchy lines linked together by heavily stressed starting consonants. There's no soft, musical comfort at the end of these lines. It is stripped down, it's raw, and it is highly percussive. We're going to use 4 distinct Stabrime parables today to literally sound out the grueling descent and rebirth of the Übermensch. The alliteration here is absolutely crucial. It heightens the philosophical intensity, hitting you like the steady, relentless beat of a war drum that perfectly mirrors the brutal reality the seeker has to face.
All right, before we hit the verses themselves, let's lay out the roadmap of this transformation. Here are the psychological stages our seeker, often called the convalescent, must travel. We kick off with existential brokenness. Then, we plunge into a paralyzing dread, which is symbolized by a massive serpent. After that comes a violent, convulsive surge of will. And finally, it all culminates in the affirmation of life. Now, what's really interesting here is how these incredibly deep, abstract psychological concepts map perfectly onto what feels like a visceral, graphic novel-style physical battle. The seeker is convalescing, they're healing, but this isn't a peaceful recovery. This healing demands an intense, brutal confrontation with their own despair to actually reach the peak of self-overcoming.
Okay, here's our first Stabrime verse, which marks the start of the ascent. I want you to really listen to the heavy P, S, and H sounds as I read this. Peak of the pale ash, pure is the void. Severed from support, solitude is 7. High on the heights, hollow the heaven. You can almost hear the biting wind and the absolute emptiness in those consonants, right? The peak of ash represents a windless vacuum. Our seeker has climbed way beyond the reach of men, beyond even the high ridges of those dying gods. They are entirely alone. It's so empty that even their own echo refuses to return to them. This is the absolute height of isolation. That peak represents what the sources famously called the 7th solitude. And wow, this isn't just your everyday loneliness. It's a severe crucible. The seeker is totally severed from all past certainties, from all human comforts. But here is the crucial point. The seeker absolutely must not face this isolation as a victim. Unlike those weeping gods who are being crushed by their fading kingdom, our seeker acts as a convalescent. They are actively using this profound despair, this freezing vacuum of isolation, as the raw fuel they need to heal, to overcome themselves, and ultimately to forge completely new values from scratch. But, as we know, healing is rarely peaceful. Just as the seeker reaches the dizzying heights of this solitude, they're attacked. I'm going to read this second verse with a slow, heavy pace to really match the dread it conveys. Sliding the serpent, strangling the speech. Weight of the world round, weary the will. Black is the beast flesh, bitter the burden. A massive black snake has slithered straight out of the dark. It's wrapped itself tightly around the seeker's throat, violently choking them, entirely silencing their speech. It represents the suffocating weight of all existence just pressing down on one single individual.
So what is this serpent, really? Philosophically, it symbolizes the eternal recurrence. This is essentially the core Nietzschean test. It's the absolutely terrifying realization that everything that has ever happened, every single pain, every joy, and worst of all, every small, mediocre, disgusting aspect of humanity will just repeat itself over and over again for all eternity. No escape. The physical choking of the snake represents a paralyzing dread and a deep existential nausea. The seeker is quite literally choking on the bitter burden of an endlessly repeating, deeply flawed reality.
Right at this moment of near death, the seeker makes a choice, and you'll notice the pacing radically shifts here. It becomes frantic, incredibly energetic. Bite through the blackness, breaking the beast. Spat is the spirit wrought, starting the self, master of marrow, maker of might. Instead of just sinking into silence like the dying gods did, the convalescent experiences this massive, convulsive surge of will. They don't try to patiently unwrap the snake. No, they violently bite right through its black flesh, severing its head and spitting the spirit rot into the abyss. They actively shatter the cycle.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate act of will. You see, spitting out the serpent's head isn't just about surviving a physical attack. It perfectly symbolizes a radical self-overcoming. The convalescent conquers their nausea about the infinite loop of existence. They stop looking outward for some cosmic savior or some objective divine law. Instead, they just embrace reality exactly as it is, complete with all its flaws and its infinite repetitions. They cease being a victim of fate, and in that exact moment, they take their first breath as the absolute master of it.
So with the serpent defeated, the transformation is complete. Listen to the expansive, totally triumphant tone of this final parable. Laughing the light word, losing the lie. Creator of cosmos, conquering the cold. Freedom is found, fate is forsworn. Out of the terrifying, freezing silence of the abyss, a brand new sound echoes out. It's not the pathetic weeping of the old gods. It's holy, transformative laughter. This marks the official realization, the actual birth of the Übermensch.
Let's break down exactly what this newly born Übermensch represents. This figure is no longer reliant on external rules or old gods. Instead, they forge their own autonomous values right there in the utter loneliness of the heights. They possess an unconditioned freedom, having completely outgrown standard human limitations. They bring holy, transformative laughter straight into the darkness. And honestly, most importantly, they master existence by actively willing the infinite return of every single moment. By choosing to will it, they take the terrifying, freezing void of the seventh solitude and they turn it into a sacred sanctuary.
Let's move on and see how this builds a complete picture by contrasting our two subjects directly. Think of the old divine order, the gods Wotan and Donar. Their nature is basically that of clumsy kings. Their reaction to hardship, weeping and wailing. And their ultimate fate is a catastrophic, kingly crash straight into absolute, freezing silence. Now, contrast that with the Übermensch. Their nature is that of a radiant creator. Their reaction to the darkest dread is holy, transformative laughter. And their ultimate fate? They create a sacred sanctuary by actually mastering fate itself. The gods are entirely destroyed by the dark, but the Übermensch finds a triumphant rebirth right inside it.
Which brings us to the ultimate point of this explainer. This isn't just some abstract, grim, dark fable about mythical beings on a mountain of ash. Not at all. It's a highly practical map for navigating existential dread. We are all going to face the suffocating weight of repetitive, meaningless cycles at some point in our lives. So, the question remains for us. When the black serpent of recurrence wraps around your throat, will you surrender and sink into freezing silence like the old gods, or will you find that convulsive surge of will to bite right through the dark? Think on that as we wrap up today's journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.